Stop that bulldozer! I screamed, but it was too late. Our HOA president, Victoria Langford, was already plowing through my father's workshop, the place that had kept his PTSD at bay since Vietnam. She looked triumphant behind the controls, certain no one could challenge her authority. "Bylaws are bylaws," she yelled over the roar of the engine. "This eyesore is coming down today." What Victoria didn't know, as she demolished my disabled father's therapy space, was that she wasn't just destroying some random veteran's workshop. She was bulldozing the personal sanctuary of State Senator Richard Maddox, chairman of the housing committee that regulated HOAs across the entire state. The workshop had been Dad's salvation after Vietnam left him with severe PTSD and a permanent limp. Within those wooden walls, his trembling hands found purpose, crafting toys for the Children's Hospital. His Senate colleagues knew him as the formidable chairman of housing regulations, but our neighbors just knew Rick, the friendly vet who kept to himself. "People treat you differently when they know you write laws instead of just follow them," he always said. That's why we kept his political career quiet. But Victoria Langford, in her designer heels and armed with a tablet like a weapon, was determined to improve neighborhood aesthetics at all costs. When she first complained about the workshop, Dad calmly explained it was grandfathered in long before the HOA existed. She smiled tightly. "Rules are rules, Mr. Maddox. You have until tomorrow to remove it." None of us could have predicted how far she would go, or how spectacularly it would backfire. The next morning, I found Dad in his workshop, carefully sanding a rocking horse for the Children's Hospital. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating 30 years of memories. His Purple Heart medal was displayed beside Mom's photo. Shelves were lined with crafting awards and walls covered in thank you drawings from kids who'd received his handmade toys. "She can't really force you to tear this down, can she?" I asked, running my hand along the workbench he'd built after returning from Vietnam, when his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Dad adjusted his reading glasses, examining legal papers spread across his desk. "The workshop predates their bylaws by decades. I've already called my office to pull property records." He didn't look worried. After facing enemy fire and 15 years of state politics, an angry HOA president hardly registered as a threat. But Victoria Langford wasn't just any HOA president. She'd moved into our quiet community 6 months ago and immediately campaigned for leadership, promising to restore property values and enforce standards. What most neighbors didn't know was that she'd run similar campaigns in 3 previous communities, leaving each one after implementing controversial policies and special assessments. That afternoon, Victoria's red SUV screeched to a halt in front of our house. She wasn't alone. 2 board members, her loyal allies, flanked her as she marched up our driveway, waving printed bylaws like a declaration of war. "We've reviewed your situation, Mr. Maddox," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. "The board unanimously agrees the structure violates our aesthetic standards." Her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the weathered siding. "Furthermore, we've discovered it sits 6 inches too close to your property line." Dad leaned on his cane, his voice maintaining the calm, diplomatic tone he used during Senate hearings. "Victoria, I have the original property survey and building permit from 1985. There's clear legal precedent. New management, new standards," she interrupted, handing him an official-looking document. "This is a formal violation notice. Compliance within 24 hours or daily fines begin. Additionally, we've hired contractors to address the violation ourselves if necessary, at your expense, of course." I stepped forward, unable to contain my anger. My father is a disabled veteran. This workshop is medically necessary for his PTSD therapy. The Americans with disabilities act clearly. Victoria's dismissive laugh cut me off. "Please, real therapy requires medical equipment, not woodworking hobbies." She glanced at Dad's limp, then quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the visible reminder of his sacrifice. As they drove away, neighbors watched from windows and porches. Mrs. Moreno, whose son received one of Dad's handcrafted toys during cancer treatment, walked over with freshly baked cookies. "Senator Maddox," she whispered, careful not to be overheard. My cousin works for the housing authority. If you need anything. Dad smiled, squeezing her hand. Just Rick here, remember. And don't worry. I'm handling this properly. That evening, I overheard Dad on the phone with his chief legislative aide. Pull the Veterans Housing Protection Act and recent precedents on HOA overreach. No, don't contact the governor yet. I want to resolve this at the local level, if possible. The next morning, I woke to find Dad already in his workshop, packing cherished items into boxes. Medals, photos, specialized tools custom-made for his limited dexterity. My heart sank. You're not actually giving in? He shook his head. Just protecting what matters most. I filed the legal paperwork this morning, but something tells me Victoria won't wait for due process. He was right. That afternoon, while Dad attended his weekly veteran support group, I noticed unusual activity at the HOA office across the park. Victoria and board members huddled around a contractor I'd never seen before, pointing toward our property and nodding emphatically. The contractor seemed hesitant, checking paperwork repeatedly, but eventually nodded when Victoria handed him what looked like an envelope. Panicked, I texted Dad's aide. Emergency. At house. HOA planning something. Need legal intervention now. By sunset, neighbors began gathering near our property, drawn by the unusual number of vehicles near the HOA office. Mr. Lee, whose garden fence Dad had helped repair last summer, approached nervously. They're talking about bringing equipment tomorrow morning, he whispered. Early, before people leave for work. Victoria told my wife it would be a quick removal operation. I spent the night on our back porch, watching the workshop where Dad had healed his invisible wounds for decades. Around midnight, he joined me, 2 cups of coffee in hand. You should sleep, he said gently. How can you be so calm? I asked. Your legal notification won't even be processed for days. Dad smiled sadly. I learned in Vietnam that you can't always prevent an ambush. Sometimes you just have to be ready for the aftermath. He looked at his workshop silhouetted against the moonlight. It's just wood and nails, sweetheart. What matters is what we build next. Neither of us could have predicted just how literal that statement would become.